When did the first hospital come to be?
So in 1968, we started a campaign. I got elected as the chair of the North Thompson Ambulance Society, and from there we started to move ahead with the push for a hospital. It was a long, slow process. Politically, it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to give us a clinic, the government, for the longest time. And the people of the Valley were so 100% behind it that they fought very hard. I was chairman of the board until we got the hospital in 1971. And in an agreement with the government, because of the way we finally achieved a hospital, I decided that I would resign to ensure that the hospital went ahead, because the atmosphere had got very toxic between myself and the government.
All right.
How did that manifest itself?
Well, I would travel to Victoria on a very regular basis, or Vancouver, to have meetings with different officials, either in the Ministry of Health or cabinet ministers or MLA. So my process of being involved with government started quite quickly, actually. So then we were able to attract, with all the publicity that we've got about getting a hospital, and that we attracted a doctor here on a full-time basis, Dr. Rudy Regier. And of course, you become pretty close friends to these people who come in and help you out. In fact, the first medical clinic here was in what we call the Kapustinsky building on the flats, the opposite end to where the pizza place is now, the Double R Pizza. That's where we set up a clinic. We just borrowed furniture and moved a doctor in here. And so the doctor would also join in the campaign. And what had happened is, I would go to a meeting, they would tell me certain things, I would come back, report to the board, and then we would find that the government officials weren't backing up what they would say in a private conversation. So what I did is I carried a briefcase into every meeting, and inside that briefcase I had a tape recorder. So I started to tape record every conversation that I would have with cabinet ministers or ministers of health, so that when I came back I could report to the board. Well, on this particular occasion we went to Vancouver to meet the Minister of Health, which was Rolf Lothmark at the time. And I went in, put my briefcase down, started my tape recorder, and the minister turned to the doctor and said, "If you continue this fight, we will take your medical credentials away and you will not be allowed to practice." So I had recorded this. And so what happened is that at that time the ruling party was Social Credit in this province, and basically they ruled with an iron fist. And some members of the party, the Liberal Party in Vancouver, said, "We understand that you have a tape recording of the Minister of Health threatening a doctor." I said, "Yes, I do." So they asked me to take it back to Vancouver, and they took out the background noise, which you guys are going to be used to doing, and they stood up in the legislature at question period in Victoria and said, "Minister Lothmark, is it correct that you threatened the doctor in Clearwater if he continued to persist in pushing for a hospital?" And he stood up on his feet and he vehemently denied it. So the Liberal man asked him to the Speaker of the House, could he play the tape recording? And the tape recording was played in the House with him threatening the doctor. So I was known to Mr. Ghilardi. I'd spent quite a bit of time with Minister Ghilardi, and I'd also met the Premier, Mr. Bennett. And after they played this in the legislature, I had a phone call from Phil Ghilardi, and he said, "John, do you have any more tapes?" I said, "I have lots of tapes." But he said, "Well, if you promise not to play another tape, I'll see what I can do." So within 8 hours, we had a hospital guaranteed to Clearwater, and it had nothing to do with our needs. It had to do with blackmail.
Wow, that's awesome.
And where we hid the tapes, I'll tell you where we hid the tapes. Down a well at Dutch Lake Resort, because the fellow who owned the resort at that time, Howie Melsness, was on our board as well. So we knew that we were doing something that could be considered maybe inappropriate. So we would hide the tapes down the well so nobody would ever find where the tapes were that we had.
So does the tape still exist today?
I have no idea what happened to the tape now.